We caught up with Ted Cruz, fresh off a piping hot endorsement from his former Republican rival, Jeb Bush. It was, as they say in the TV business, a wide-ranging discussion, including some talk about what the senator's current rival, Donald Trump, said, that the United States should, as you just heard, reconsider its involvement in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Let's talk about NATO. He's taken out a pretty unusual position for someone in either party to say, U.S. contributes too much, and maybe as president he would look at the fundamental purpose of NATO, and maybe there isn't one. What is the role, what would the role of NATO be in a Ted Cruz administration? Its current role or something different?
Well, look, you are right that Donald Trump's foreign policy is bizarre, and it is, he's got very little understanding of foreign policy, and what he does know is wrong. What he has been advocating is weakness, is withdrawal from the world, is isolationism. So with respect to Israel, for example, he says he will be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. And with respect to NATO, just 2 days ago, he advocated essentially withdrawing from NATO. Now that is a terrible idea, and it was striking that the day after he called for that, we saw a tragic terrorist attack in Brussels, where NATO is headquartered. We shouldn't be withdrawing from Europe. We shouldn't be abandoning our allies. We should be strengthening our alliance with Europe, strengthening our alliance with Israel. And if Donald Trump had his way, if America did withdraw from NATO, it would hand a massive victory to Putin, a massive victory to ISIS. And the idea that Donald Trump would want the presidency to begin with a preemptive surrender, turning tail and running, that is a sign of weakness, and it is striking that Donald's foreign policy is to the left of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. They're not arguing for withdrawing from NATO, and yet Donald seems unable to distinguish our friends from our enemies, and that's a very dangerous approach.
He would, I'll just say parenthetically, he would say on Israel, his AIPAC speech maybe repositioned him on this question of neutrality. We'll get to that if we have time, but on NATO.
Well, but let's be clear, he said many times.
He did.
That he would be, quote, neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. The fact that he read a speech somebody wrote for him off a teleprompter that pretended to stand with Israel is completely inconsistent with where he has been over and over and over again. And it reflects, look, anyone who can't distinguish between Israel, between the IDF forces that protect innocent civilians, and Islamic terrorists that seek to murder us, that raises real questions about their fitness and judgment to be commander-in-chief. And we need a president who understands the nature of radical Islamic terrorism and is prepared to do whatever is necessary to defeat them. And I'll point out that Donald's lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of radical Islamic terrorism is every bit as evident with regard to Iran, where he says he will keep in place this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal and then he'll just renegotiate it. Well, anyone who thinks that this is not a real estate deal, and the Ayatollah Khamenei is not selling beachfront property. The Ayatollah Khamenei has pledged death to America, and he means it. And there's a sharp, you want to understand one of the simplest differences between Donald Trump and me. On day one as president, I will rip to shreds this Iranian nuclear deal, because the biggest national security threat facing America is the threat of a nuclear Iran. Donald doesn't understand that, and both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton would keep this deal in place because neither one acknowledges or understands just how dangerous the Ayatollah Khamenei is.
All right, go back to NATO.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm Dickie Flats in Mejia, Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, we spend a lot of money on NATO. They don't seem to be fighting ISIS. Mm-hmm. And where's the threat from Russia today that NATO is preventing? Well, I got to say again, what is the role of NATO right now? The symbolism of standing with Europe. What is its actual mission?
Listen, NATO has been the most effective military alliance of modern times. NATO effectively stood up to the Soviet Union in the Cold War, and the idea now that Russia doesn't pose a threat, Russia is invading its neighbors. Russia has invaded Ukraine, Russia is threatening the Baltics, Russia is threatening much of Europe, and NATO is a strategic alliance. And NATO should be a vehicle for going after ISIS. If we had American leadership, and NATO doesn't work without American leadership, if we had American leadership, NATO could play a critical role in utterly destroying ISIS. Now, Donald's approach is just withdraw and hide, and he somehow thinks the bad guys will leave us alone. Well, you know, Obama tried that. That's called leading from behind. It doesn't work. We need a president and commander-in-chief who will utterly and completely destroy ISIS. That's what I'll do as president.
Politics is not static and things can change, but if you look at a snapshot of where we are now, it's not clear based on polling that you're a stronger general election candidate than Donald Trump. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's actually abundantly clear. The polling consistently shows that Hillary beats Donald. The polling consistently shows that I beat Hillary. I'll give you an example. Last week, there was a poll, a general election poll in Utah, showed Hillary beating Donald Trump in Utah. Bright red, conservative Utah. Listen, if the Republican nominee can't even carry Utah, you're looking at a Walter Mondale-style landslide defeat. And that is one of the reasons why so many Republicans across the ideological spectrum are uniting behind our campaign.
Last question, just ask you to address this proposal that you floated the other day, the notion of increased police surveillance of Muslim neighborhoods here in the United States. Can you name a neighborhood where you think that would be proper? And what would you say to a young child who would see police in their neighborhood and wondering why is their neighborhood, a young Muslim child, getting increased scrutiny?
Well, let's place this in broader context. Yesterday in Brussels, we saw a horrific terrorist attack. Our prayers are with those who were murdered, those who were wounded. And yesterday was a reminder that this was not an isolated attack. This wasn't a lone wolf. This is part of a global jihad being waged by radical Islamic terrorism, being waged by ISIS. And President Obama and Hillary Clinton and the modern Democratic Party is in a state of denial. They are so captive to political correctness, they won't say the words radical Islamic terrorism. They won't act sensibly to defeat it. And in fact, every time we see a terror attack, whether Paris or San Bernardino, or no doubt coming after Brussels, President Obama goes on national television and lectures the American people on Islamophobia. Enough is enough. We need a commander-in-chief who recognizes his number one responsibility is to keep America safe. That's what I will do. Now, when it comes to stopping radical Islamic terrorism, you've got to identify the problem and then use every law enforcement tool, every intelligence tool, every national security tool available to defeat it. We're in New York right now. New York had in place a very effective program to work cooperatively with the Muslim community to monitor and prevent radicalization and to prevent Islamic terror attacks from occurring before they happen. Now, unfortunately, Mayor de Blasio came into office and he's every bit as captive to political correctness as is Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, and they disbanded the program. That doesn't make any sense at all. And you ask, what would someone think if they saw a police presence?
A 10-year-old.
Listen, the police are here to protect us. I categorically reject the view of Democrats that the police are the bad guys. And people are fed up with this notion every time there is an incident. Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bill de Blasio side with the criminals, with the looters, with the thugs, rather than the brave men and women of blue. I'm proud to stand with the police, and I'll tell you, there was a moment not too long ago when the NYPD stood up and turned their backs on Bill de Blasio that spoke not just for New York, but for the whole country. When we have police in a community, it protects that community and keeps it safe. And we need to stop pretending radical Islamic terrorism doesn't exist and instead work to defeat it and keep this country safe.